I'm Natalie Parker, 28, standing in my small Chicago apartment staring at a pile of birthday decorations for my dad's big day. My hands shake as I untangle a string of lights, not from excitement but dread. My sister is coming, and her sharp tongue always cuts deeper than I expect. Growing up, she would roll her eyes at my quiet life, mocking my boring job while flaunting her glitzy downtown success. Last time we met, she sneered, "You'll never measure up," and I swallowed it to keep the peace. Now I'm bracing for worse. I can already picture her strutting in, ready to humiliate me in front of everyone we love. At Dad's birthday, she didn't just cross a line, she pushed me to the ground, pointed, and spat. "Your place is on the floor." The room erupted in laughter. I whispered softly, "I understand," and quietly walked away. Weeks later, my phone wouldn't stop ringing. My parents, my sister, even her husband, all begging to see me. But I left only one message, just 5 words, sharp and cold. "Look down at the floor. If you were in that situation like me, would you walk away quietly or fight back on the spot?" Share your thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to hear your answer. A few weeks before Dad's birthday, I was sipping coffee in my modest Chicago apartment, scrolling through LinkedIn on my laptop. I don't often check my sister Diane's profile. Her posts are a relentless showcase of self-praise, but curiosity tugged at me that morning. Diane Parker, my older sister, had just shared an update that hit like a slap, a photo of her in a polished downtown office captioned, "Another $1 million deal closed." Not everyone can keep up, especially those stuck in dead-end office jobs. The jab was unmistakable. She meant me, the office worker she's always belittled. My stomach twisted, but I kept scrolling, hoping it was a one-off. It wasn't. Another post from last month showed Diane at a glitzy gala, with her husband Stephen Walsh grinning beside her. The caption stung deeper. "Surrounded by winners, not wannabes who think pushing papers is a career." I set my coffee down, the mug cold in my hands. Diane had no idea I wasn't just some clerk. For years, I'd been a financial investor, quietly funneling hundreds of thousands of dollars into her stockbroking firm through anonymous channels. My investments kept her company afloat during rocky markets times she'd bragged about outsmarting the crash. I never told her, or anyone, not even my dad James, who raised me to value the work over the spotlight. But Diane's words on LinkedIn, so public and cruel, brought back that old ache of being invisible in her eyes. Growing up, Diane would scoff at my quiet ways, my choice to live simply in our suburban neighborhood. "You're wasting your potential," she'd say, her voice dripping with pity. Now she was broadcasting it to her entire network. I clicked deeper into Diane's profile, my pulse quickening. A comment from a family friend, Margaret, our neighbor, popped up. "Wow, Diane, you're killing it. Your sister must be so proud." Diane's reply made my jaw clench. Natalie's too busy with her little desk job to notice. I wanted to scream. Instead, I leaned back, staring at the ceiling. I remembered a Christmas years ago when Diane laughed in front of our cousins, saying I'd never amount to much. I'd brushed it off to keep Dad happy, but it hurt. My mother, Linda, gone years now, would have hated seeing us like this. Diane's taunts weren't new, but airing them online felt like a betrayal. I'd been her silent lifeline, pouring money into her firm to save her employees, not her ego. Yet she still saw me as less. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. I could comment, reveal the truth about my investments, and watch Diane squirm. But that wasn't my style. I'd learned her need to one-up me stemmed from her own insecurities. Instead, I messaged my business partner, Richard Coleman, confirming our next investment move, another boost to Diane's firm, hidden as always. I told myself it was for her team, not her. But her posts kept gnawing at me. I scrolled through more comments, some from Dad's old friends praising Diane's success, oblivious to her cruelty. One hit hard. "Diane, your family's lucky to have you leading the way." Leading, I'd been carrying her company for years. I closed my laptop, my chest tight. Diane's posts weren't just boasts. They were a public challenge, daring me to step out of my shadow. But I didn't want to play her game. Dad's pride in my quiet choices meant more than Diane's approval ever could. Still, her taunts were growing bolder, and with his birthday looming, I sensed trouble brewing. I grabbed my phone to text Dad about the party menu, determined to focus on him. A few weeks after seeing Diane's venomous LinkedIn posts, I found myself at a sleek Chicago restaurant, its dim lighting and clinking glasses doing little to ease my nerves. Dad had insisted on a family dinner to catch up before his birthday, and I'd agreed, hoping to keep things civil. Diane sat across from me, her designer dress catching the candlelight with Stephen, her husband smirking beside her. Dad, ever the peacemaker, tried to steer the conversation toward old memories of our childhood in the suburbs. But Diane wasn't here for nostalgia. She leaned forward, her wine glass glinting, and fixed her eyes on me. "So, Natalie," Diane said, her voice sharp enough to cut through the chatter, "still slaving away at that little desk job of yours?" The table went quiet. I gripped my fork, my face burning, but I forced a smile. "It's fine," I said softly, not wanting to upset Dad. Diane's laugh was cold. "Fine. Oh, honey, you're such a failure compared to me. I close million-dollar deals while you're filing papers." Stephen chuckled, egging her on, and I felt the eyes of nearby diners on us. I wanted to tell her the truth, that my investments were the backbone of her precious firm, but I bit my tongue. Dad's shoulders slumped, his face tight with discomfort. Diane wasn't done. She waved her hand, dismissing my silence. "You know, some people are just meant for small lives," she said loud enough for the next table to hear. "I mean, look at me. I'm carrying this family's name forward." My chest tightened, but I kept my eyes on my plate, refusing to give her the reaction she craved. Dad tried to change the subject, mentioning his plumbing work, but Diane cut him off. "Oh, Dad, let's not bore everyone with that," she said, her tone dripping with condescension. I saw the hurt flicker in his eyes, and it took everything in me not to snap. Then came the bill, $400 for Diane's extravagant orders of wine and steak. She slid it toward Dad with a smug smile. "You got this right. I mean, I'd pay, but I'm saving for our new condo." Stephen laughed again, and I felt a surge of anger. Dad, ever proud, pulled out his wallet, his hands trembling slightly. I wanted to stop him, to tell Diane she was out of line, but I knew it would only make things worse. "I'll cover it," Dad said quietly, his voice strained. Diane leaned back, satisfied, while I swallowed my rage. She'd humiliated us both, and, for what to prove, she was better. As the waiter took the payment, Diane leaned toward me again. "You should thank me for showing you how real success looks," she whispered, her words like a blade. I met her gaze, my voice steady, despite the storm inside. "I see it clearly," I said, low enough for only her to hear. She smirked, thinking she'd won, but I was already replaying her words, her arrogance, in my mind. I'd spent years propping up her company, saving her from collapse, and she dared to call me a failure. The thought of Dad's quiet sacrifice for her ego made my blood boil. I excused myself to the restroom, splashing cold water on my face to calm down. Diane's cruelty wasn't new, but this public display felt different, bolder, more vicious. I thought of Linda, our mother, who'd always preached kindness over competition. She'd be ashamed of Diane now. As I stared at my reflection, I realized this dinner wasn't just a one-off. Diane was escalating, and Dad's birthday was next. I dried my hands, my resolve hardening. I'd keep the peace for Dad's sake, but Diane was testing my limits. A few days after that humiliating dinner, I was in my Chicago apartment sorting through birthday decorations for Dad when the doorbell rang. I opened it to find Diane standing there, her arms crossed, eyes blazing. She didn't wait for an invitation, pushing past me into my living room. "We need to talk, Natalie," she snapped, her voice sharp as ever. I shut the door, my heart sinking. I'd hoped to avoid her until Dad's birthday, but Diane clearly had other plans. She spun around, her designer heels clicking on my hardwood floor, and pointed a manicured finger at me. "Do you have any idea how embarrassing you are?" Diane said, her tone venomous. Dad fawns over you like you're some saint while I'm out there making this family look good. I stood frozen, her words hitting like a wave. She was furious not because of anything I'd done, but because Dad loved me, maybe more than her. I took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. I'm not trying to compete with you, Diane, I said evenly. She laughed, a harsh sound that echoed in my small space. Compete. You're not even in my league. Your pathetic little life, your cheap apartment, your boring job. It's a disgrace to our family name. I clenched my fists, her words slicing through me. She had no clue I'd been bankrolling her company, pouring hundreds of thousands into her firm to keep it afloat. I'd kept it secret not for glory, but to protect her employees, and honestly, to avoid her gloating. But now, Diane stood in my home, tearing me down. You need to stop acting like you're something special. She continued, pacing. Dad's birthday is coming, and I won't let you ruin it with your sad, simple act. Change your ways, or you're not invited. Her threat landed like a punch. Not invited to Dad's birthday. The one I'd been planning for weeks. I thought of Dad, how he'd always defended me, even when Diane belittled me. I remembered a time years ago when Linda, our mother, was still alive. She'd caught Diane mocking my modest dreams and pulled her aside, saying, "Your sister's heart is worth more than your pride." Diane hadn't listened then, and she wasn't listening now. I wanted to tell her the truth, that her success rested on my investments, but I held back. She'd only twisted into another way to claim superiority. Instead, I met her gaze. I'm not the one embarrassing anyone, I said quietly, my voice steady despite the anger bubbling inside. Diane scoffed, tossing her hair. Keep telling yourself that. But if you show up to Dad's party looking like a nobody, don't expect a seat at my table. She stormed toward the door, pausing to deliver one last jab. You're lucky I even bother with you. The door slammed behind her, leaving me standing in the silence of my apartment. My hands shook as I picked up a string of birthday lights, trying to focus on Dad. Diane's words stung, but her threat cut deeper. She thought she could control me, erase me from Dad's day. I thought of Richard, my business partner, and the investments I'd made in Diane's firm. Maybe it was time to rethink that support. I sat down, staring at the decorations. Diane's visit wasn't just a tantrum, it was a line in the sand. She'd always seen me as less, but now she was trying to push me out entirely. I wouldn't let her ruin Dad's birthday, but I also wouldn't let her walk over me anymore. I grabbed my notebook to jot down party details, my resolve strengthening. A few days after Diane's confrontation, I stood in Dad's suburban Chicago home, taping streamers to the living room walls. The scent of his favorite meatloaf baking in the oven filled the air, a small comfort as we prepared for his birthday. Dad shuffled in carrying a box of old party hats, his smile warm but tired. You're doing too much, Natalie, he said, setting the box down. I shook my head, tying a balloon to a chair. It's your day, Dad. I want it perfect. But my chest tightened with worry. Diane's threat to exclude me from the party lingered, and I feared she'd turn this celebration into another stage for her cruelty. Dad noticed my silence and sat beside me, his calloused hands folding a paper tablecloth. You're thinking about her, aren't you? He asked, his voice gentle. I nodded, unable to hide my unease. Diane's been intense lately. I'm scared she'll ruin this for you. Dad sighed, his eyes distant. She's always been competitive, even as a kid. But you're my rock, Natalie. Don't let her dim your light. His words hit deep, stirring memories of Linda, our mother. She'd loved birthdays, always making them about family, not show. I remembered her baking Dad's cake one year, laughing as she smeared frosting on my nose. That warmth felt so far away now, with Diane's venom poisoning everything. I taped another streamer, my hands trembling. Diane's recent words, calling my life a disgrace, echoed in my mind. I hadn't told Dad about her visit, not wanting to burden him. He'd always tried to keep us close despite her jabs. You think she'll behave tomorrow? I asked, half hoping. Dad chuckled, but it was hollow. I'll talk to her. She's my daughter too, but she needs to learn respect. His faith in Diane felt naive, but I didn't argue. I'd spent years propping up her company with secret investments, yet she saw me as nothing. The thought of her disrupting Dad's day made my stomach churn. We moved to the kitchen where I checked the meatloaf while Dad arranged photo frames on the table, pictures of us as kids, Linda beaming beside us. "Your mom would be proud of you," he said, holding up a photo from my 10th birthday. "She always said you had a quiet strength." I smiled, but my throat tightened. Linda's values, kindness, humility, were what I clung to even as Diane mocked them. I wondered what she'd think of Diane now, parading her arrogance, while I silently kept her firm afloat. I pushed the thought aside, focusing on the task. "Let's make this the best party yet," I said, forcing cheer into my voice. As we hung a banner, Dad hummed an old tune Linda used to sing. It steadied me, reminding me why I was here. This party wasn't just for Dad, it was for the family we used to be. But Diane's threat loomed large. Would she really try to push me out? I pictured her storming in, her husband Stephen trailing behind, ready to belittle me again. I hadn't told Richard, my business partner, about her latest stunt, but I knew he'd urge me to stand my ground. I wanted to believe I could keep the peace, but Diane was testing my limits. I straightened a crooked streamer, my resolve growing. No matter what she did, I'd protect Dad's day. I pulled out a notepad to finalize the guest list, my pen moving swiftly. The day of Dad's birthday arrived, and the family home buzzed with laughter and chatter. Streamers hung brightly, the meatloaf sat steaming on the table, and guests, neighbors, old friends mingled with drinks in hand. I moved through the crowd, refilling plates, my eyes darting toward the door. Diane hadn't shown up yet, but her threat to exclude me still echoed. Dad caught my gaze, giving me a reassuring nod as he chatted with Margaret, our neighbor. I forced a smile, hoping the night would stay peaceful. But when Diane strutted in, Stephen trailing behind her, my stomach knotted. Her sharp eyes scanned the room, locking onto me with a smirk that promised trouble. She made her way over her heels, clicking loudly, drawing attention. "Nice little party," Natalie Diane said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "Did you spend all week on this?" I ignored her, adjusting a centerpiece, but she stepped closer, her presence suffocating. Dad tried to intervene, raising his glass for a toast, but Diane cut him off. "Oh, let's not pretend this is anything special," she said loud enough for heads to turn. I clenched my jaw, focusing on a stack of napkins. I'd promised Dad I'd keep the peace, but Diane was already testing me. As we sat for dinner, I took a seat near Dad, hoping to stay out of her line of fire. The guests laughed over old stories, and for a moment it felt like the family Linda had loved. But then Diane stood her chair, scraping, and pointed at me. "You know, Natalie, you don't belong at this table," she said, her voice cutting through the chatter. Before I could respond, she reached over and yanked my chair back. I stumbled, crashing to the floor, my hand scraping the hardwood. The room erupted in laughter, Stephen's loudest of all, as Diane loomed over me. "Your place is on the floor," she spat, her words sharp as knives. The guests' laughter grew, some assuming it was a cruel joke, but Dad's face paled, his hands gripping the table. I looked up at Diane, her smug grin burning into me. Every moment I'd held back, her LinkedIn jabs, her restaurant taunts, her threats at my apartment flooded back. I'd poured years of silent support into her company, keeping her afloat, and this was my reward. My face burned, but I stood slowly, brushing off my dress. "I understand," I whispered, my voice steady despite the humiliation. The laughter died down, replaced by awkward murmurs. Diane raised an eyebrow, thinking she'd won, but I locked eyes with her for a moment before turning away. I grabbed my purse and walked out the door, clicking shut behind me. Outside, the cool Chicago air hit my face. I leaned against the porch railing, my hands shaking. Diane's words weren't just cruel, they were the final straw. I thought of Linda, how she'd taught me to rise above pettiness. But this wasn't pettiness anymore. It was malice. I'd spent years funneling money into Diane's firm, believing I was helping her employees, protecting Dad's pride. No more. I pulled out my phone and typed a message to Richard, my business partner, start the process to pull our investments from Diane's company. I hit send, my heart pounding. That decision wasn't just about money, it was about reclaiming my dignity. I glanced back at the house, the glow of the party spilling through the windows. Dad deserved better than Diane's spectacle. I knew she'd feel the consequences soon, but for now, I needed space. I walked to my car, my steps firm. Moments after I stepped outside, the front door of Dad's house swung open and Richard, my business partner, hurried toward me. His face was flushed, his suit slightly rumpled from a late flight into Chicago. "Natalie, I got your message," he said, catching his breath. I couldn't let this night end without setting things straight. I frowned, confused, as he gestured toward the house. "Come back inside. There's something everyone needs to hear." My heart raced. Richard wasn't one for theatrics, but his urgency pulled me back through the door, the party's chatter still lively within. The living room was warm with candlelight and laughter, though the sting of Diane's cruelty lingered in my chest. Dad stood near the cake looking worried while Diane and Stephen held court near the fireplace, her voice carrying over the crowd. Guests' friends like Margaret and Dad's old co-workers sipped drinks, unaware of the storm brewing. Richard cleared his throat, his presence commanding attention. "I apologize for interrupting." He began, his voice steady but firm. "But there's something you all need to know about Natalie Parker." Heads turned and Diane's eyes narrowed, her lips curling into a skeptical smirk. I froze, my pulse hammering. Richard had never been to one of our family gatherings before, and I hadn't expected him to show up tonight. "Natalie has been more than a friend or colleague to me," he continued, scanning the room. "She's a financial genius, a silent investor who's saved countless jobs, especially at one company in this very room." Whispers rippled through the guests. Diane's smirk faltered, and Stephen shifted uncomfortably, his glass clinking against a table. I wanted to stop Richard, to keep my secret safe, but his words pressed on, relentless. "For years, Richard said, Natalie has funneled hundreds of thousands of dollars into Diane's stockbroking firm anonymously through our partnership. Her investments kept it afloat during market crashes, saving employees and their families." The room fell silent, Forks pausing mid-bite. Diane's face drained of color, her eyes darting to me, then back to Richard. Without Natalie's funds, Diane's million-dollar deals would have crumbled long ago. Gasps echoed, Margaret's hand flew to her mouth, and Dad's eyes widened, his expression a mix of pride and shock. Diane stammered, her voice sharp. "That's ridiculous. My firm's success is mine." Stephen placed a hand on her arm, but she shook it off, her cheeks flushing. Richard raised a hand, calm but unyielding. "I have the records, Diane. Every transfer, every rescue, Natalie's work. She never wanted credit, but I won't let her be humiliated for it." The guests stared, some whispering, others gaping at me. I stood rooted, my throat tight, as memories of Linda's lessons in humility flashed through my mind. I'd hidden my role to avoid this exact spotlight, but Richard's truth had torn that veil away. Dad stepped forward, his voice soft. "Is this true, Natalie?" I nodded, unable to meet his eyes. "I did it for the people who work there. Dad, not for her." Diane's laugh was brittle, desperate. You're nobody. This is a lie." But the guests' murmurs grew louder, their faces shifting from amusement to awe. Stephen's jaw tightened, his usual smugness gone. Richard turned to me, his voice softening. "You deserve better than being pushed to the floor, Natalie. You're the one who's been holding things together." The weight of Diane's words, her cruel taunts. Her public shaming lifted slightly, replaced by a strange mix of relief and exposure. I'd never wanted this moment, but Richard's arrival had changed everything. The guests began to approach me, their voices warm with questions and praise, while Diane stood frozen, her empire of pride cracking. Dad pulled me into a hug, his arm steady. "I always knew you were special," he whispered. I managed a small smile, but my mind was already racing toward what came next. Diane's world was about to shift, and I wasn't sure I was ready to see it fall. I stepped outside for air, needing a moment to breathe. Weeks after Dad's birthday, I sat in my Chicago apartment, the city skyline muted through my window. The news had broken. Diane's stockbroking firm had collapsed. Without my investments pulled after her public humiliation of me, her company couldn't weather the latest market dip. Headlines buzzed about layoffs, clients fleeing, and Diane's name tied to failure. I felt a pang of guilt, not for her, but for the employees I'd tried to protect. My phone vibrated with messages, but I ignored them, sipping coffee, trying to focus on work. Then my doorbell rang, sharp and insistent. I opened the door to find Diane, Stephen, and Dad standing there. Diane's usual polish was gone. Her hair was messy, her eyes red. Stephen looked deflated, his tie loose while Dad's face carried a quiet plea. "Can we come in?" Dad asked, his voice soft. I stepped aside, my chest tight, knowing this wasn't a casual visit. They settled in my living room, the silence heavy. Diane spoke first, her voice cracking. "Natalie, we didn't know how much you did for us. I'm sorry for everything." Stephen nodded, his usual arrogance absent. "We were wrong to treat you that way." He said, his words stiff but earnest. I leaned against the counter, arms crossed, their apologies ringing hollow. I'd spent years enduring Diane's taunts, her LinkedIn posts, her restaurant mockery, her threats at my apartment, her cruel spectacle at Dad's party. Each memory stung, and their regret felt like too little, too late. Dad stepped forward, his hands clasped. "Natalie, please. Your family. Can't we find a way to move past this? For Linda's sake?" His mention of our mother, her values of unity, hit hard. I saw the pain in his eyes, the weight of a fractured family, but my own wounds were too raw. "Diane," I said, my voice steady, "you called me a failure, a disgrace. You pushed me to the floor in front of everyone." Her face crumpled, but I pressed on. "I gave everything to keep your company alive, not for you, but for the people who depended on it. And you threw it back in my face." Stephen looked away, shame etching his features. Diane's voice trembled. "I was wrong, Natalie. I was jealous, stupid. Please, give us another chance." Her words echoed Dad's plea, but they couldn't erase the years of disdain. I thought of Linda, how she'd taught me to stand tall, to value dignity over pride. Diane's collapse was her own doing, built on arrogance I'd once overlooked. I'd carried her weight for too long, sacrificing my own peace. "Look down at the floor," I said, my voice low, echoing her cruel taunt from the party. Diane flinched, her eyes wide, while Stephen froze. "That's where you wanted me," I continued. "But I'm done letting you walk over me." Dad's shoulders sagged, his hope fading, but I couldn't bend, not this time. Diane's tears fell, but I felt no urge to comfort her. "I'm not reinvesting," I said firmly. "You'll have to face the consequences of your choices." Stephen opened his mouth, then closed it, defeated. Dad reached for my hand, his voice breaking. "Natalie, I just want us to be a family again." I squeezed his hand, my heart aching. "I love you, Dad, but family doesn't mean letting someone tear you down." He nodded, tears in his eyes, understanding but grieving. As they left, Diane's steps were slow, Stephen trailing behind her. Dad lingered at the door, his face etched with sorrow. "I'm proud of you," he whispered, then followed them out. I shut the door, the silence settling around me. I thought of Linda again, her lessons about strength and self-respect. Diane's fall wasn't my victory. It was a reminder that pride could destroy even the strongest foundations. I'd chosen my dignity, and that was enough. I sat at my desk, opening my laptop to start a new project.
My name is Daisy Hale. I'm 29 years old, and this is the story of how the woman I loved called me practice, and how I walked away without looking back. The rain tapped against our apartment windows like restless fingers. It was late, the kind of night where the city feels like it's holding its breath. I sat on the couch, staring at the flickering TV I'd muted hours ago, while Jess, my girlfriend of 3 years, twisted the promise ring around her finger. The same silver ring I'd given her on our 1-year anniversary. She used to call it her forever ring, but she never once moved it to her left hand. Daisy Jess's voice cracked the silence. "We need to talk." I muted the last ghost of sound from the television and turned to her. My voice came out flat, steadier than I felt. "Yeah," I said. "We do." Jess blinked surprise, like I had stolen her script. She leaned forward, eyes sharp, but her hands fidgeting with that ring. I already knew what was coming. My gut had known for weeks. "You know, don't you?" she accused, voice rising defensively before I'd said a word. "Know what I asked quietly? That I've been seeing someone." The words landed like dull knives. Not sharp, not sudden, just inevitable. "Which part should I know?" "Jess," I asked, keeping my tone calm, almost detached. Her face flushed, her composure cracking. "God, you always do this. You watch people like some creepy lie detector. It's exhausting." I tilted my head. "You used to like that about me. Remember?" My eyes flicked to her hands. "You only twist your ring when you're lying. And you changed your nail polish right before your last girls' night. The one where Tasha texted me asking why you bailed on them." Silence. Heavy. Then Jess exhaled like the truth had been dragged out of her ribs. "Fine," she hissed. "Yes. There's someone else. His name's Jason." She gestured vaguely between us. "But it's not just that, Daisy. This," she waved at our home, "our life me was never supposed to be forever. You were safe. Practice. For when I found my real soulmate." Practice. The word burned its way down my throat like gasoline. "Don't make it ugly," she said quickly, as if she hadn't just detonated my chest. "You knew I was out of your league." I stood so abruptly, her sentence trailed off. My vision tunneled my body, moving before my brain caught up. I walked to the bedroom, pulled my gym duffel from the closet, and started filling it with the Essentials Passport laptop, the watch my dad gave me before he died. Nothing more. Behind me, Jess followed, her voice turning shrill. "Wait, that's it. No fight, no begging me to stay. You're just leaving." I yanked open the drawer, grabbed socks, shoved them into the bag. Why would I fight for someone who just called me her practice run? Her phone buzzed on the dresser screen, lighting up the dark. A Tinder notification. Jason. "Still on for tonight." I barked a bitter laugh, sharp and humorless. Couldn't even wait until I left. "It's not what you—" She snatched the phone like that would erase the words. "God, you're so emotional. This is why I need a real man." My chest ached, but I zipped the bag, calmly shouldered it, and turned to her. "Who?" "Someone who won't notice you're lying. Someone who lets you cheat in peace." "Congrats, Jess. You found him." I pointed to her phone. "Hope he remembers you're allergic to shellfish." Her mouth open closed. Nothing came out. "The lease is up in 3 months. I'll transfer my half remotely. Don't contact me." Jess moved to block the doorway, desperation flaring in her eyes. "You're really just walking out, after 3 years." I looked her dead in the eyes. "You ended us the second you called me practice. I'm just making it official." When I brushed past her, she grabbed my arm, nails biting into my skin. "You'll regret this," she spat. I peeled her fingers off one by one, her hand trembling against mine. "The only thing I regret," I said, voice low, "is not seeing you sooner." The door clicked shut behind me. The rain outside had stopped. I made myself 3 rules as I walked away. No impulsive reactions. No emotional revenge. No leaving a single trace. I was done being practice. From now on, I would be the one writing the rules. The first 72 hours after I left Jess, I disappeared. Not physically. My body was still in the city, but piece by piece, I stripped her out of my life until there was nothing left to cling to. I called it Operation Ghost Protocol. I started with the easy stuff. Instagram unfollowed, blocked every photo we'd taken together, deleted. 147 memories gone in less than 10 minutes. Our Spotify playlists erased. She once made me a mix called Jess and Forever. Now it was nothing but silence. Netflix password changed, logged her out of every device. Then came the petty things. Venmo blocked. After she had the audacity to request $8.50 for half of last month's toilet paper. LinkedIn connection removed. Career karma is still karma. Apple Music, I deleted the playlist she made for me, ironically titled Songs That Sound Like Us. But my masterpiece was the shared Google Photos album. I didn't delete it. Instead, I renamed it Evidence of Poor Life Choices. Then I left it sitting there untouched, a landmine waiting for her to notice. Her first text arrived at 1:17 a.m., 3 days post-breakup. Jess, we need to talk about the security deposit. I read it, didn't reply. 12 minutes later, another message. Jess, hello, this is money we're talking about. I took a screenshot and sent it to Mike, my best friend since college, with the caption, Phase 3 initiated. Mike called almost immediately, half laughing, half incredulous. Daisy, she's already spiraling. Guess what Jason bailed on their date tonight? I didn't answer, just stared at the ceiling and let the silence speak for me. By week 2, the digital breadcrumbs started. Jess's Instagram story, a vague quote about people who can't handle strong women. Her Spotify showed she'd suddenly gone back to our old playlists, the same ones she mocked for being basic. Then came intel from mutual friends. Dude, one of them texted me. She asked if you've been stalking her socials. I laughed out loud. Texted back, tell her yes. Tell her I hired a private investigator. Tell her whatever makes her sweat. But the best part was something she'd forgotten, her Google search history, still linked to our shared account. I scrolled through late one night, smirking as I read, How to know if your ex still cares. Jason, personal trainer, cheating Reddit. Why do people ghost if they still love you? Her panic was a slow leak, and I was watching the pressure build from a safe distance. Week 3 brought escalation. A voicemail, her voice raw and broken. You think you're so smart with your silent treatment? Newsflash. I wanted you to leave. Jason and I are glass clinking, better than ever. So thanks for freeing me up for a real man. But in the background, I caught it. A TV playing The Notebook. No Jason's voice, no laughter. Just the soundtrack of loneliness. I saved the voicemail under the title Karma's intro track. The second crack came more dramatically. Mike sent me a screenshot Jason's Instagram story. Jason with his arm around a blonde at some neon-lit club. Captioned, When you upgrade. I stared at it for a long moment. My chest didn't ache this time. No sharp burn. Just a cold, detached recognition. Then I went back to rigging my fishing line. The dawn in Tamarindo was glassy, the ocean still as a mirror. I'd been there for 2 weeks learning to cast from an old fisherman who didn't speak English. We didn't need words. He'd nod when I got it right, grunt when I didn't. Simple, honest. My phone buzzed again. Mike. She commented classy on his post. Then he deleted it. I didn't reply, just took a photo of the sunrise and posted it on my story, my first in months. No caption, no tags, just the horizon bleeding orange. Her reply came faster than I expected, from an unknown number. So this is where you've been running away to play beach bum. I blocked it without responding. The third sign of collapse hit harder. Another screenshot, this time from her Twitter account, the one she swore she never used. If a man tells you he's single, assume he has a wife, a girlfriend, and a secret family in another state. I snorted. Classic Jason. That night, another voicemail. Her voice was wrecked, almost unrecognizable. You must be loving this. Turns out your little observant thing wasn't so crazy after all. He's been engaged for 8 months. A shaky breath. I need to know if you... I deleted it mid-sentence. But the most telling sign wasn't digital. It was Mike's call, 3 a.m. His voice strained. Daisy, you're not going to believe this. She showed up at my place last night. Drunk. Crying. Said you owed her an explanation. I watched a stray dog trot down the beach outside my cabina. What did you say, I asked? I told her you said thanks. Thanks. Yeah, her words, not mine. Thanks for proving my point. Then she puked in my hibachi grill. The dog stopped to lick at a coconut husk. The sea whispered steady and unbothered. I smiled to myself. She was unraveling, and I wasn't even there to watch. But the truth was, a part of me wondered if ghosting her completely was enough. Because Jess didn't just betray me. She tried to reduce me to a footnote, and I wasn't sure silence could ever balance that kind of debt. By the 4th week, Jess's mask had completely slipped. Her carefully curated life, filtered smiles, sharp captions, glittering nights, was starting to rot at the edges, and she couldn't stop herself from leaving crumbs for me to find. It began with the desperate texts. Unknown number. Please just tell me you hate me. Unknown number. I can't sleep. At least say something. Unknown number, fine. Be a child. I was going to apologize, but forget it. You're pathetic for ignoring me like this. I miss you. You. Answer your phone. By dawn, 7 more messages had stacked on top of each other. The final one chilled me most. Unknown number. I'm outside your apartment right now. Where the hell are you? I sipped my coffee in Costa Rica, watching pelicans dive bomb into the ocean. Then I snapped a photo of the empty hammock swaying between palm trees. Posted it. Her reply was immediate. Oh my God, are you in Costa Rica while I'm here dealing with this? Block, delete, silence. The unraveling didn't stop. Mike called me, voice low, the way you talk when holding something fragile. She's unraveling Daisy. Bad. Jason dumped her. I raised an eyebrow, even though he couldn't see me. Shocking. He had a fiancée the whole time. Guess she found out when the other woman tagged him in a wedding prep post. I could almost hear Jess's rage the way she'd slam her phone down when the world stopped orbiting around her. Then came the public spectacle. Mike's voice was tight when he called at 4:17 a.m. They took her to St. Mary's. What happened? She crashed Jason's wedding reception, screamed at him for 20 minutes, then hurled a champagne flute at the mirror behind the bar. He paused. 7 stitches in her palm. Jason's pressing charges. I closed my eyes, saw her in my mind. Shoulders hunched the same way they had when she lost control with me. That violent tremor, like her body always knew, before she did, that something inside her was about to shatter. Is she alive? I asked. Unfortunately, Mike muttered. Days later, another voicemail arrived. Her voice was slurred, probably from painkillers. I know you know, and I know you're not coming, but I need you to know something. A pause, then a ragged inhale. That night when I said you were practice, her breath shook. I lied. You weren't practice. You were the real thing. I was just scared. The message cut off abruptly. I didn't replay it, didn't analyze the crack in her voice or the words she hadn't finished. I saved it, filed it away, like evidence. But the truth was, Jess wasn't haunting me. She was haunting herself. Every message, every drunken outburst, every failed attempt at rewriting the past, she wasn't chasing me. She was chasing the version of herself she'd destroyed. And I realized, for the first time since I left, I wasn't angry anymore. Just empty. Then fate twisted the knife. A wedding invitation arrived at my mailbox in Costa Rica. Thick cardstock, embossed lettering. Pretentious, the kind of thing Jess always mocked. But the names on it weren't hers. Jason Michael Carter and Tasha Renee Collins. I froze. Tasha, Jess's friend. Mike called right on cue. You're not going to believe this. Jess found out when Tasha tagged her in some bridesmaid dress-fitting post. I stared at the invitation. The RSVP deadline had passed 2 weeks ago. You going, Mike asked. I dropped the envelope straight into the trash. Nah, I said. I've got plans. 2 months later, the photo appeared on my feed. Jason in a tux, stiff smile. Tasha glowing in white. Bridesmaids lined up in pastel silk. At the far end of the line, Jess. Her smile, strained eyes, dead bouquet, clutched so tight her knuckles turned white. The caption read, When Dreams Come True. I zoomed in one last time on Jess's clenched hand, then closed the app. That night, an unknown number lit up my screen. I should have picked you. I stared at it for a long moment. My fingers hovered over the keys, then typed, But you didn't. Send. For the first time in months, I slept peacefully. The first time I saw Jess again, it wasn't planned. It was raining the hard kind sideways, stinging needles on skin. I had come back to the city for one weekend only just long enough to empty out my storage unit before heading on to Bali. And then there she was, standing under the awning of our old coffee shop, the same place we had our first date. Her hair was darker now, cut shorter, as if she thought a new style could erase old sins. But what struck me most wasn't how different she looked. It was how small she seemed. I almost walked past her. Almost. Daisy Jess's voice broke through the rain. I kept moving. My boots splashed against the pavement. She lunged, fingers catching my arm. Seriously, after everything, you're just going to ignore me. I turned slowly, my gaze dropping to her hand on my jacket. One by one, I peeled her fingers off the same way I had the night I left. You're blocking the door. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. I stepped around her, pushed through the door, and ordered a black coffee. The smell of roasted beans hit me like a punch of déjà vu. Behind me, I could feel her eyes burning holes into my back. You look good, she said finally. I didn't turn, just took my cup too hot to drink and replied, Fuck you. Her voice cracked. You don't get to just disappear and then come back like nothing happened. I exhaled slowly, let the steam rise from the coffee, then said, You're right, I don't. And then I walked out, leaving her still dripping beneath the awning. Later that night, I was at Mike's place, half a beer in hand, when he shook his head. She's losing it. Again. I scrolled absently through my phone, pretending not to care. New messages blinked on the screen. Unknown numbers. I knew who they were from before opening them. I know you saw me today. Jason dumped me. He's a liar. He's the real villain here. We need to talk. Block. Delete. Silence. Mike whistled low. Cold. I finished my beer, the taste bitter. Cold would have been telling her she was right. Right about what? I set the bottle down, grabbed my keys. That I was practice. Mike frowned, brows knitting together. What the hell does that mean? I gave him a thin smile. It means she thought I was temporary. And she was right, but not the way she wanted. I was just practice. For myself. For learning how to walk away. But Jess wasn't done. The messages escalated over the next weeks. I hate you. I miss you. I'm sorry. Answer me, please. Every text sounded like a different person. Anger, sorrow, bargaining, regret. She was cycling through every stage of grief, but she wasn't mourning me. She was mourning the version of herself that still believed she could always come back no matter how deep the wound she left. Then came the wedding crash. Mike called again, his voice tight. She showed up at Jason and Tasha's reception. Full-on meltdown. Screamed in front of everyone. Threw a champagne glass. It shattered behind the bar. Security had to drag her out. I closed my eyes. I could picture it too easily. Jess's shoulders shaking her hand, trembling right before the throw. That violent energy, like she wanted someone else to bleed so she wouldn't have to. She's pressing charges against him now, Mike added. And he's pressing charges against her. It's a mess. Sounds about right. You should call her Mike, said carefully. I shouldn't, I answered. And I won't. A week later, a voicemail came at 300 a.m. Her voice was shaky, wrecked. I know you'll never forgive me, but you were the only real thing I ever had. You were the love of my life, Daisy, and I destroyed it. For a long moment, I sat in silence, the phone against my ear, rain against the window again, just like the night it ended. Then I hit delete. I wasn't her closure, and she wasn't mine. We were just two ghosts haunting the wrong places. The airport bar was crowded, the kind of chaos where suitcases roll over shoes, and voices blur into static. I'd just come through security Bali boarding pass tucked into my passport. That's when I noticed him. He was leaning at the counter, half smile on his lips, a climbing magazine sticking out of his bag. His presence was calm, solid, like he wasn't trying to be seen, but you couldn't ignore him anyway. He glanced at my untouched glass and nodded. You waiting on someone? I shook my head. No, just deciding whether to drink or delete another voicemail. He chuckled. Not the mocking kind, the understanding kind. Sounds like you already made the decision if you're here alone. I studied him. Brown hair slightly messy, like he hadn't overthought it. Calloused hands wrapped around his drink. Eyes sharp, but not piercing. They looked steady. Daisy, I said finally, extending a hand. Brian, he replied. Grip firm, not desperate. We talked until the gate announcement crackled overhead. About travel. About the places we wanted to see. About nothing that required us to bleed. For the first time in months, maybe years, I realized I wasn't performing. I wasn't defending. I wasn't dissecting every word for hidden lies. It was just conversation. And that was enough. But Jess hadn't vanished. Not yet. My old phone buzzed in my pocket, the one I'd shoved in a drawer but still carried for emergencies. I made the mistake of glancing at the screen. Unknown number. I heard you're happy now. Unknown number. Do you even care that I'm in pieces? I slid the phone face down on the counter. Brian noticed. Work, he asked. Wrong number, I said. It wasn't a lie, not anymore. On the flight, Brian and I ended up seated 2 rows apart. I pretended to sleep, but every so often my eyes drifted toward him, his steady breathing, the book open on his lap. And I wondered, maybe this was what peace looked like. Not fireworks, not chaos. Just safety that didn't feel like settling. Weeks passed, and Brian became more than an airport coincidence. Coffee turned into dinner. Dinner turned into long walks, where silence wasn't uncomfortable. His presence was the antidote to everything Jess had left behind. Her games, her ultimatums, her endless need to win. One night, while he cooked pasta in his tiny kitchen, my phone buzzed again. No hard feelings. You got the happy ending. I got the therapy bills. I stared at it for a long moment, then deleted it. Brian glanced over his shoulder, wooden spoon in hand. Everything okay? I forced a smile. Yeah, just wrong number again. He nodded, untroubled, and went back to stirring. And for the first time, I felt no urge to correct him, because Jess was the wrong number. And Brian, he felt like dialing the right one finally. Years slipped by faster than I expected. Brian and I built something steady, something quiet, a rhythm of Sunday markets road trips with no destination, late night conversations that didn't end in slammed doors. It wasn't dramatic, it wasn't fireworks, it was real. But ghosts don't care how far you've come. They find ways to slip back in. It started with an email. Subject: no hard feelings. The name in the sender line made my stomach twist. Jess. I hovered over the message, debating whether to open it. Curiosity won. I saw the photos. She's prettier than me. Funnier too, I bet. Funny how life works. You get the happy ending, and I get the therapy bills. Anyway, congratulations. Or whatever. No apology. No accountability. Just bitterness, dressed up as resignation. I showed Brian sliding the phone across the couch. He read it, handed it back. You want a reply? I stared at the blinking cursor in my draft box. I could type a dozen responses, cruel ones, kind ones, lies, that pretended I didn't care. But all I said was no. Brian kissed my temple. Good choice. But Jess wasn't done. More messages trickled in over the months. Do you ever think of me? I still dream about us. You were the real thing, Daisy. I just didn't know until it was too late. I never replied. Still, some nights I found myself reading them in the dark, my thumb hovering over the keyboard, wondering if closure was something you could ever give someone else, or if it was something they had to dig out of their own ruins. The final blow came unexpectedly. I received a wedding RSVP in the mail. Mike's. A neat stack of names scribbled in messy cursive. Halfway down the list, I froze. Jess, with a +1 I didn't recognize. For weeks, I kept expecting her to show up to corner me at the reception to spill venom one last time. But she didn't come. Mike told me later she'd moved to Portland. Dating a forestry worker. Stable, quiet, boring. For once, I believed him. That night after the wedding, I tucked the RSVP card into a drawer, sat on the edge of the bed staring at the small piece of paper with her name scratched across it. A relic of a ghost who'd finally stopped knocking. But the truth, she didn't leave me with scars. She left me with a compass. A reminder of every place I refused to return to. And maybe that was her only gift worth keeping. 5 years later, the last time I saw Jess's name was on paper. It wasn't a love letter or an apology. It was scribbled in fading cursive on a wedding RSVP, Mike's wedding. She'd written it next to a +1 I didn't recognize. But she never showed. Mike told me later she'd moved to Portland. Dating a guy who worked in forestry. Seemed stable, he shrugged. I nodded, bouncing my daughter on my knee. Good for her, and I meant it. That night, as I tucked my daughter beneath the covers, she grabbed my finger with her tiny hand. "Mommy," she whispered, "tell me the story about the princess who got lost." Her eyes glowed in the dim lamplight, expectant. I smoothed her hair back and kissed her forehead. "That one's boring, sweetheart." She pouted. "Then which one?" "The pirate," I said with a smile. Her face lit up. With the treasure. With the treasure I promised. She giggled, curling into her blanket, and I began weaving a tale about ocean storms and finding gold where no one thought to look. Later, when the house was quiet, I stood by the window. The stars shimmered above, distant and steady. My life, messy, imperfect, beautiful, was finally still. Somewhere far away, Jess was probably out there. Maybe she was happy. Maybe she was still chasing ghosts. But for me, the story was over. Because I had learned something Jess never did. Love isn't practice. It isn't games or lies or fire that burns until nothing's left. Love is choosing to stay, to build, to begin again. And as I turned away from the window, the night silent around me, I realized I wasn't haunted anymore.